take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for taking the time to listen to this presentation. I was lucky enough to be able to work in the Shasta River in a really, I guess, fortunate capacity. We were charged with trying to understand how Coho made a living in the Shasta River. Where do they rear? What conditions did they need to survive? And when I started doing this, we knew Coho lived here, but we didn't really know how they did it. For example, if you went out in the summertime to access the Shasta River and look for juveniles, you wouldn't find them because everywhere we went, the water was too warm. One time of the year that we would see them would be in the springtime when they'd be leaving. We operate a rotary trap at the mouth of the Shasta River. This photograph is taken in the upper watershed where there's quite a bit of spring inflow. And this is kind of an idyllic place where I guess it's their Coho's happy spot. The water is pretty shallow. You're looking at the surface right there. And the water is very calm. It's very low velocity. They have a preference for that. They have a really specific requirement for habitat. And they have an unfortunate life history. And I say unfortunate because it collides directly with the way humans want to use the water in the Shasta River. So for a full 18 months of their life, they're in fresh water, unlike Chinook salmon, which want to leave the water, the tributary, and get down to the ocean sooner and do most of their rearing down there. Coho will spend typically the first 18 months in the tributary. So they're subject to all kinds of things over the summer, low flow conditions and high temperatures. Let's see if I can make this work for me. Oh, that's not working. Anyway, that works. Can you guys see the top of the title, or is that blocked out?
Right now I see Shasta River Juvenile Coho. Yeah. Yep. It just
what we know about the Shasta River, can you read that?
Yep. It just changed. So you're right on track.
Okay. So this is a whole assemblage of different projects, field projects and studies that have been going on. Some of them have been going back on since 1930. Some of them have been going on since 2020. But including the adult counting weir, which is operating right now, which counts adult salmon and steelhead coming back usually from early September, some years as late as December, some years into November. It's different. It's over the time. It's been different every year. With the rotary trap, we operate a trap at the mouth of the river. Started in 2000, and would collect juveniles and produce estimates of production. So, just in a nutshell, that you catch a known number of fish, and you're going to put a mark on them that's going to make them distinct. So, in some cases, we'll dye them, actually change their color with a temporary dye. And don't do it with all the fish, but we'll just do a known number, like say 100 of them. And then we'll release them back upstream with the trap, and we'll see how many of those marked fish we recapture. And that'll give us the trap efficiency. Because we know we're not catching all the fish, but if I release 100 fish and I catch 30 of them back, I'm going to say that I'm 30% efficient. And then I look at my total number that I caught, and I say that represents 30% of the total number of fish leaving the river. There's some assumptions there, but it's a really useful tool for understanding the timing of fish emigrating, going to the Klamath, and in terms of the numbers of fish that are leaving. And it can also be used along with adult numbers that are coming back. So you can understand the relationship between adults produced and or juveniles produced and adults returning. We did radio tagging of adults migrating upstream. For about 4 or 5 years, we captured adults that were coming upstream and planted radio tags, esophageal radio tags, and then looked for those tags, overflew the watershed and looked for where those tags were found. Pit tagging of juveniles, this was a really powerful tool as well. It's where you'd implant a little, it's identical to the RFID tags that are being used for identifying pets. It's a transponder. It doesn't have a battery in it, but when it runs through an electric field, it'll emit a unique code. And so it'll tell you where that individual is and when. It'll be recorded on a time and date stamp. So you basically can track where these fish are throughout the watershed in a way, once they're tagged without having to handle them repeatedly. And then we've done watershed-wide temperature monitoring. We deployed, I think, 50 different temperature monitors throughout the watershed that would help us understand what was going on with water temperature. So all these studies combined to produce quite a bit of data. And that was funded by the Bureau of Reclamation in Klamath Falls, Shasta Valley RCD, Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, the Fisheries Restoration Grants Program, the Department of Fish and Game, as well as private donors and cooperators. So it was a large assemblage of groups and people and effort. And over the years, literally hundreds of people have been involved in assembling this data set. So it's not, we know a fair bit about the Shasta River and Coho and where they live in the watershed. So I just wanted to start out by talking about the status of cohorts and present day run size. So a cohort is Coho have a life history that very typically they're going to take 3 years, a 3-year life cycle. So they'll come back as adults, say in 2021, they're going to spawn and lay their eggs. The eggs are going to come out of the gravel in spring of 2022, and then they're going to rear until spring of 2023, an entire year before they'll leave as age 1 fish, 1+ fish, and they'll go out to the ocean. They'll stay in the ocean for 18 months, and then they'll come back as a 3-year-old. There's a few exceptions to that, but by and large, that's what they're doing. So you can track because of that, they don't intermix. So like on Chinook salmon, they can mature anywhere from ages 2 to 5. So every given brood year is made up of different age fish. Whereas with Coho, it's almost exclusively 3-year-olds. There's a few 2-year-olds, but mostly on Coho salmon. So what you're seeing in a run of Coho is the results of what's happened to that one brood year. You're not combining brood years, if that makes sense. I think this will help a little bit. So this is we're going to call this arbitrarily Cohort A. So these guys came back when the first year we started counting Coho at the weir. We had 291 fish come back. And then the next generation, when those came back as adults, we actually increased the number of fish that went up to 373 adults. And then since then, it's been a downward sled till, we're at 50 is in 2019. That was the last number for that particular cohort. Here's Cohort B that started in 2002. And you can see it was always kind of depressed, that we never had more than 100 since we started counting. Historic numbers on Coho is probably never more than a couple of thousand in the Shasta River. But those counts were actually done pretty well after habitat has been impacted. So we don't really have any true estimates of what Coho used to do before the river was so heavily impacted by agriculture. But anyways, this is where we are with Cohort B, and this is Cohort C. So these guys, this is the cohort that's returning this year. Last came back in 2018, coming back in 2021. We'll see what they get. But you can see it goes up and down quite a bit. There's a fair bit of variability here. But as a rule, they're all trending downwards. And there's a couple things that are problematic here, because as you drop the number of adults, it gets harder and harder. Reproduction will become less successful because we'll talk about it in just a second here. But there's not enough fish that can find each other. All cohorts are trending downwards. This table is all 3 of those cohorts are represented here by different colors. So the green is the Cohort A starting in 2001. The gray is Cohort B, and the C is 2003. The cohort started in 2003. And just for a second, let's take a look at this. So you've got the first year we started doing this, we had 291 adults come back, and that produced 12,000 smolts in 2003. So you guys, thumbs up. Does that make sense in terms of tracking that cohort? Is that understandable? Cool. So smolts per adult is just looking at the number of 1+ fish that leave as a result of the adults that came back in the brood year back. So in 2003, 44 smolts were returned per returning adult. So we had if each of these 291 fish, it's obviously the males aren't laying eggs, but it's just kind of it's an index, I guess you could say. So, but anyways, you can see this number is all over the place. Some years it's 44, some years it's as high as 81. Some years it's as low as 2 or even 1, and so this kind of makes you scratch your head, like what is going on in this watershed? Why are these numbers? This is not normal. Let me put it that way. I mean, in a healthy, robust population, I don't think you would see this kind of variability. But I really don't. I haven't worked with a robust population of Coho, but my assumption is that this wouldn't be going on. And I know you don't see it for Chinook. You don't see this kind of variability, and so it makes you wonder. The fate of these animals must vary from year to year. The conditions in this watershed must be really different because everything that's happening from adults to here in 2008 to juveniles here in 2010, that all took place in fresh water. It all took place in the watershed. There's no El Nino, there's no Japanese fishing boats or any other stuff that people are always getting excited about. This is completely within the fresh water of the Shasta River. If you plot all this number of smolts produced on the y-axis and adults on the x, you'll see that there's some obvious trends, like you get a lot of adults come back is going to produce a lot of juveniles. 12,000 is produced by 350 adults. But then you get down into this part of the chart, and it's weird because now you're getting like the same number of adults coming back on the x-axis is producing a wide range of smolts, all the way from 4,000 down to 1 or 2, and so that indicates that something's not working the same from year to year. So causes of variable number of smolts per adult, depensation. That's really when the fish can't find each other. There's a number of things as populations become smaller and are shrinking, collapsing. There's some of the things they're not. There's no competition between the fish. They can't find each other. There's a whole cluster of things that are going on. None of them are good, and they're hard to get out of. You kind of enter into what they're calling like an extinction vortex. The population just starts to collapse because they can't. Literally, if you get fish coming back over a 2-month span and you've only got single-digit number of adults coming back into the river, the likelihood of them finding each other in the watershed is not very good, let alone building a redd. And so you've got very few chances of reproduction going on. Environmental conditions, are another thing that changes from year to year. But because this is a watershed that's fed by cold springs, it's not like it would be affected by drought per se, because these fish have a real affinity for cold water. So you're not going to, the cold water's there year in, year out. So something else is going on. So it leads us to the bottom line, the question of what are the causes of the low production years? So we know that this is a compilation of literature values, but the optimal water temperature for rearing juvenile coho is between 10 degrees C and 15.5 degrees C. So that's in the 50s to, I think, low 60s. I'm sorry, I don't have a Fahrenheit equivalent of it, but it's chilly. It's not super cold, but it's a scarce commodity, cold water in this part of the country in the summertime. And you get it from snowmelt, of course, but the springs are really just an incredible match with these fish. That's why that's why Coho have done so well here, is because we have these springs. In that optimal water temperature range, the fish have positive growth rate. Their swimming performance is optimized. They have a resistance to disease. It's in the optimal level. And importantly, pathogens have a reduced virulence within this range. And it's no small matter. These fish helps to really boost their reproduction. Suboptimal is between 15.6 and 20.3. So in this range, the fish will still grow. The respiration is increased dramatically above 15.6. now there's the diseases are doing better. And above number 4 here, above 15.5, temperatures begin to trend towards optimal range of competing warm water fish that are in the watershed, non-native fish like bass and other species that will prey on salmon. So you're getting into the operating range of some fish that are competing with the coho, and which is number 5 there. So just to look at a table there that's got that. So here's optimal 10 to 15